Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Israel is dealing with another shooter attack over the weekend.
The attack near Jerusalem's Old City injured 8 people. We're on the scene with developments. Fire engulfs a building and stops Sunday worship at a church in Cairo. It kills more than 40 and injures others. We'll take you there. 4 meat packers control more than 80% of all meat packing in America, and 2 are outside the country.
The country that feeds itself controls its own future. But if we start importing food from another country, then they control us. And we are getting dangerously close to that.
See why this is a big problem for American cattle ranchers, a potential threat to our food supply, and a threat to our national security. A teen survives a head-on collision with a train, and now he meets one of the rail drivers. We'll have the story, and his weapon on the baseball field is the Bible. See what scriptures Luke Weaver has on his glove. All these stories and more coming up next from the CBN Newsroom.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And we begin this half hour with this weekend shooting in Jerusalem. It comes less than a week after Israel concluded its Operation Breaking Dawn against the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip. An Arab-Israeli opened fire on a bus near Jerusalem's Old City, wounding 8, including 5 Americans. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports that terror groups are claiming victory.
Terror groups welcomed the attack and called it an heroic operation.
Today, this operation confirms that the Palestinian people continue on the path of resistance, and all the tools of struggle and resistance against this occupation are to protect our people, our land, and our holy sites.
The attack occurred just outside Jerusalem's Old City walls, near a place called David's Tomb, where people pray. The terrorist opened fire on a crowded bus and those nearby, wounding 8, including a pregnant woman.
6 wounded arrived at the trauma unit at Shard Zedek Medical Center. 2 wounded in serious condition, a pregnant woman in her 30s with a very complex abdominal injury, and a man in his 60s with an injury in the neck and head, also a gunshot wound.
All the wounded are recovering, including the woman and her baby, which had to be delivered by C-section. While Hamas praised the attack, the suspect, Amir Sidawi, a Jerusalem resident, is not a member of a terrorist organization. He does have a criminal background and turned himself into police hours after the shooting. The U.S. condemned the attack, and U.S. Ambassador to Israel Tom Nides tweeted, "Deeply saddened to confirm that Americans were injured in this attack. I've spoken with the families and will keep them in my prayers, continuing to monitor the situation." Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid said police will reinforce Jerusalem.
There is one conclusion from this event, as from previous events. Whoever harms the citizens of Israel will have nowhere to run. We will hunt them down and get them everywhere, and will deal with them with the full severity of the law.
He emphasized that Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, is what he called safe, open, strong, and welcoming to tourists and residents. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
We turn now to Cairo, Egypt, where a major fire at a church killed 41 people, including at least 15 children. It injured another 16. The fire erupted at the Coptic Orthodox Church during morning services Sunday. The church quickly filled with black smoke. Eyewitnesses say they saw several people jumping from the building. Video shows a number of fire trucks on the scene and others carrying victims to ambulances. The official cause of the blaze is not known. A police statement says the initial investigation points to an electrical short circuit. Democrats are calling on intelligence officials to brief lawmakers on the national security implications of the documents seized from former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. The former president could face charges of violating the Espionage Act and obstruction of justice. Trump maintains he did nothing wrong, and some supporters are calling the investigation an abuse of power by the FBI. Alder Hurd is on this story.
We've learned the FBI search warrant of Donald Trump's Florida home authorized confiscation of every record he ever saw, read, or created during his 4 years as commander-in-chief, right down to scribbles on a napkin. Democrats are asking for a damage assessment from the intelligence community on the 11 sets of classified documents recovered in the raid, including one marked SCI, a classification for some of the most sensitive national security information that is normally viewed in a highly secured location. A lawyer for Trump signed a statement in June after a visit from the FBI saying all classified documents at Mar-a-Lago had been turned over to federal investigators.
Some of those documents were marked top secret, sensitive, compartmented information. That is among the highest designation in terms of the extremely grave damage to national security that could be done if it were disclosed.
The warrant also shows that agents were looking for evidence of 3 potential crimes, including obstruction of justice and violations of the Espionage Act. Violating the Espionage Act carries a sentence of 10 years in prison. Obstruction of justice, as much as 20 years behind bars. The former president has not been charged, and he claims the files were declassified. Some Republicans are calling the investigation an abuse of power.
The FBI raid of President Trump is a complete abuse and overreach of its authority. This is the same agency leadership that protected Hillary Clinton, James Comey, and continues to protect Hunter Biden.
The Department of Justice also allegedly took materials that contained privileged attorney-client communications. GOP members are calling on the Justice Department to release more information on reasons for this search.
I think releasing the affidavit would help. At least that would confirm that there was justification for this raid.
Lawmakers from both parties are calling for calm after threats against law enforcement and after some armed Trump supporters protested outside a Phoenix FBI office. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Coming up, some say if America feeds itself, it controls its future. And if we get food from another country, they could be in control. See why one American governor is sounding an alarm about our food supply when we come back. Four major meat packers control 85% of all meat packing in America, and 2 of those are in Brazil. That's a problem for cattle ranchers in the United States and a potential threat to our food supply and national security. Wendy Griffith brings us that story now from South Dakota.
Here in South Dakota, there are about 5 cows for every person. That's a lot of beef. And cattle ranchers say the problem isn't getting the meat to your plate. Is the fact that the meat packers are taking most of the profits.
There's 4 beef packers that control 85% of all the slaughter in the United States. These 4 beef packers are recording profits of anywhere from $1,200 to as high as $2,000 a head during the pandemic, where the rancher is at a break even to even a loss.
Les Shaw is a 4th-generation cattle rancher in White Owl, South Dakota.
We don't do this to get rich. We do this because we love it. We're proud of what my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my dad handed down to us, and there's nothing that would make me happier to be able to pass this on to my kids, my 2 girls.
Shaw admits, though, it's getting much harder to make a living raising beef cattle because of a monopoly created by 4 major meat packers, 2 in the U.S. and 2 in Brazil.
The Brazilians have a hold in this market. Our country let foreign investment into this country.
The 4 major meat packers are Tyson Foods, Cargill, and 2 Brazilian-owned corporations, National Beef Packing and JBS. In 1977, the Big 4, as they're commonly called, owned just 25% of the market. Today, that's exploded to 85% of all meat packing in America. Cattle ranchers used to receive 62 cents for every consumer dollar spent on beef. Today, that's dropped to less than 37 cents on the dollar, while the Big 4 have tripled profits in the past 2 years alone. The Ranchers Cattlemen Action Legal Fund is suing the 4 companies over accusations of manipulating prices.
We've alleged that they have conspired to artificially depress prices paid to U.S. cattle producers while simultaneously inflating the price of beef that consumers pay.
Bill Bullard, head of the legal fund, says the main problem is that ranchers aren't told what price they'll receive for their cattle until after it's delivered to the packers.
This itself is anti-competitive, and it has helped to purge competition from throughout the entire supply chain. So the solution has to be to restore competitive forces to the marketplace. And you do that by forcing the packers to begin competing competitively for cattle.
During a congressional hearing in April, CEOs of the 4 packers denied any price fixing and blamed the rising beef prices on simple supply and demand. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, a rancher herself, isn't buying it. She says food security is national security.
The country that feeds itself controls its own future. But if we start importing food from another country, then they control us. And we are getting dangerously close to that. And we're seeing supply chain issues. We're seeing other countries heavily investing in our food processing systems. That is dangerous for the people that live in the United States of America.
So anytime there's a supply chain disruption, retail prices go up, the packers make record profit, and the producer suffers the consequences.
Noem recently appointed Lieutenant Governor Larry Roden, another lifelong rancher, as agriculture ambassador to focus more on helping the smaller meat packers in South Dakota.
99 of our small processing plants receive grant money. I tour them every chance I get. In addition to that, we applied for and became part of the CIS, which is Cooperative Interstate Shipment, which allows our local processors to sell across state lines, just like they were federally inspected.
Roden says the government needs to investigate the practices of those 4 meatpacking operations and break up the monopoly.
Because we have a law in the books at the federal level since 1947, it was called the Packers and Stockyards Act, which has been ignored largely, and we were doing the investigation. That's all been put on hold.
Bullard says if competition isn't restored soon, it will have dire consequences for cattle ranchers.
It's extremely serious. If we don't take some immediate corrective actions, this industry will no longer look like what it does today. We've already lost 75% of their marketing outlets, which we call feedlots in the industry, the entity that feeds the animal for the last 2 or 3 months before it's actually harvested. And so cattle producers are finding it difficult to market their cattle, even at the time when beef demand and beef exports are extremely high.
As ranchers themselves, Governor Noem and Lieutenant Governor Roden say they bring a crucial understanding to this issue, and that's comforting to Shaw and others like him.
It's a unique point right here that the Lieutenant Governor, like I told you earlier, I grew up with him. He's somewhat of a neighbor. Their door is always open.
Despite the challenges, Shaw says he remains optimistic about the future, mainly because of his Christian faith.
There's good times ahead. This is just a cycle, and it's up to us. I pray for strong men and strong women to step forward and not be silent. Take action. Do what's right and make changes. So there is a future for this business and our kids and the next generation, so this heritage doesn't disappear.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News, White Owl, South Dakota.
And still ahead, Texas leaders are investigating a graphic drag show targeting children. See what they're planning to do to prevent this in the future. Stay with us. And welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. I want to take a deeper dive right now into 2 headlines we are following at this hour. A Texas comptroller is investigating a drag show targeting children. Also, a story of a miracle, a teenager riding his bike hit head-on by a train in New Zealand, and he meets the driver 1 year later. Trey Goins-Fellows of FaithWire.com joins us now with more on these trending stories. So, Trey, let's start with that drag show in Texas, Dallas, Texas. How was this show targeting children, and what is the comptroller looking to do now to prevent it from happening again?
So the drag show was completely open to children. Families were encouraged to come. The Dallas-based bar actually advertised this drag show as family-friendly, despite the fact that there were neon signs on the walls of the bar's stage that had explicit messages, of course, not to mention many of the drag performers who were very explicitly and provocatively dressed as well. So the comptroller, Kevin Hagar, he has kids of his own, and he decided after learning about this that this was something he wanted to look into because he was afraid and believes that the bar is actually violating Texas business code, which states that a sexually oriented business, which the bar became by hosting a drag show, is required to prevent minors from coming into the building. And of course, they did not do that by advertising this as family friendly. So he's investigating whether there was actually a business violation here, on top of just being, of course, a concern for the community.
Are we hearing complaints from any others in the community regarding this show?
So there have been a lot of complaints. This is actually something that first kind of bubbled to the surface on social media, and then local lawmakers, once they realized where the videos were from, that they were from a Dallas-based bar. There's a local representative named Representative Slater. He began looking into it, called on an investigation to be launched. Hagar took it up after, seeing the video, but also hearing from local representatives and also constituents in the Dallas area and surrounding areas who are concerned. If a business wants to do what they want to do, that is not the complaint. The complaint was that they were targeting children with a sexually explicit show. So there were certainly a lot of concerns among the community members.
Can imagine there. I want to turn now to this story. 1 year ago, a teenager in New Zealand hit a train head-on as he was riding his bike. Now he meets the driver of the train, or at least one of them, for the first time. What is that teen's condition today, and how did that connection go?
It's an amazing story, Ephraim. His mom, the teenager's mom, he's now 17 years old. He was 16 when the accident happened. He was riding his bike to school. He was less than a mile away from his school when he was struck by the train. His mom says it's a miracle that he's living and breathing today. He's also walking. He's completely okay. Obviously, he's doing physical therapy and has got some work left to do, but he's made incredible strides. And it was actually in Wellington, the city there in New Zealand, leading an initiative to raise awareness about safety, wearing a helmet, looking both ways before you cross the street, lessons that we all learned as kids. He's now helping teach the next generation of kids because, look, this can happen to you. He's doing well. He said the train conductor, one of the conductors that he met, it was great to be able to meet him. And the conductor himself said it was an incredible opportunity for closure because he was obviously very shaken up by this accident. He said, so to meet the teenager now, to know he's okay, is incredible because he had no way of contacting this child until last week.
Beautiful, beautiful to see that he's doing well and promoting safety as well as that. I want to turn now to what we can expect this week on FaithWire.
Yeah, so look, I think we can all fall into the trap of idolizing different things, whether it's our smartphones or, finding a romantic relationship or whatever. It can be absolutely anything that can distract us away from the Lord. So on this week's FaithWire, we're going to explore how do we put those idols down on the priority list and make sure that Christ is at the top of our minds.
Excellent conversation. Trey Cohensfield with FaithWire.com. Thank you so much for your time. We look forward to seeing more this evening. I want to remind you at home that you can catch FaithWire on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 8:30 Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News Channel. You can also download the CBN News app and watch it at your leisure. Coming up, it's a Bible glove used by baseball pitcher Luke Weaver. See what scriptures are on the fingers of the glove and its significance. We've got that story for you when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Thanks for being with us. Singer Amy Grant is still recovering from a bike accident and being knocked out for 10 minutes. She was left with a concussion, but her team says that she is doing well. Now, because of doctor's orders, she is postponing all of her upcoming fall tour dates. If you've already purchased a ticket, it will be honored on the new date. You can see those dates listed now on our website. Major League baseball pitcher Luke Weaver, who was recently traded to the Kansas City Royals, will get the opportunity to show off his faith-inspired Bible glove to his new fans. Weaver introduced the glove last season when he played for the Arizona Diamondbacks. The glove is in a partnership with the Absolutely Ridiculous Innovation for Athletes. 3 of Weaver's scriptures are featured on the glove. They include Matthew chapter 19, verse 26, Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, and 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13. Weaver says the glove takes it to another level for him. He says he can feel God's presence, which makes him feel like he is out there ready to defend against any type of thoughts that come and try to destroy him. Well, it is now time for your Monday motivation. And today I want to leave you with this thought to jumpstart your week. You can never fall beneath the reach of God's hand. You can never run too far from his reach. Stretch your hand upward, turn around. His arms are open and waiting, and you don't have to look back. He certainly isn't. With that word, I encourage you to make this a marvelous Monday. And be sure to have yourself a wonderful week as well. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to remind you, you can always find more of our programs on the CBN News channel at any time, as well as online, cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. We'll see you back here tomorrow.